Tonight on Reporting Scotland. After the jailing of Barry Bennell for sexually abusing young footballers, Hibs manager Neil Lennon speaks of his shock at finding out that some of his friends were victims.
I knew these guys very, very well. You know, I haven't really touched on it before. I have spoken to the police on a couple of occasions. You almost feel as if I've let them down.
Also on the programme, the mystery of what happened to the body of this woman's baby. Police say they want to test new forensic evidence. Claims that RBS staff forged the signatures of customers on bank documents. The Firefighters Union passes a vote of no confidence in the management of the Scottish Service. And Elise Christie battles to be fit for her final event at the Winter Olympics after crashing out again at the weekend. Good evening. The Hibs manager Neil Lennon has spoken of his time as a youth at Crewe Alexandra Football Club during Barry Bennell's reign. The former football coach was sentenced this afternoon to over 30 years in jail for abusing young footballers and convicted of more than 50 child sexual offences. Lennon says he feels guilty that some of his own friends were abused by Bennell and he was unaware of what was going on. Stephen Godden has this report.
Long before he was a household name, Neil Lennon was a young footballer looking to launch his career at Crewe. Also at the club was Barry Bennell, a coach who used his position as a smokescreen to abuse young players. Among them, Neil Lennon's teammates, his friends.
My name's Stephen Walters. I was abused by Barry Bennell.
I was actually staying at Steve Walters' grandparents' house in Diggs. And there was a little caravan at the back that Bennell would use maybe once or twice a month, or he'd maybe come in for a cup of tea and chat. But obviously, he was very good at what he did. He could put on a very good front. There was a real touch of arrogance about him as well. He was very, very sure of himself.
Today, decades later, Barry Bennell faced justice for his crimes. Andy Woodward, whose story prompted other victims to come forward, was in court. Neil Lennon was once his best man.
I feel, sorry and I feel angry, that my teammates and my friends went through that. I also feel I feel sad that they couldn't confide in us or they couldn't confide in anyone. That this guy had such a magnetic hold over them that, that Andy couldn't even tell his parents.
But alongside the anger, there is pride in the courage shown by his former teammates.
That's very raw with me. Just because, I knew these guys very, very well. I haven't really touched on it before. I have spoken to the police on a couple of occasions, regarding it. But you almost feel as if I've let them down, because Woody was a good friend of mine.
Many of Bennell's victims went on to have successful careers. At Crewe and at Manchester City, he had a reputation as a good coach, the hidden damage he caused only emerging by the time young boys were grown men.
This guy has ruined lives, ruined careers. It's heartbreaking, really. When you're a kid, all you want to do is play football. And when you're a kid and you go to a club, you're in there under their jurisdiction and you look up to these guys as some sort of one role model, because they teach you the game, they teach you the professionalism of the game, they teach you good habits. And you do look up, you lean on them, because some of these kids come from Ireland or come down from Scotland, come from Wales or come from elsewhere. And for him to have abused it in such a way, well, we all hope he just never sees the light of day again.
64 years old, Barry Bennell was today jailed for 31 years. That hope, shared by many, is likely to be realised. Stephen Godden, Reporting Scotland.
Police investigating the disappearance of a dead baby's body have told his mother they want to test new forensic evidence to try to solve the mystery. Lydia Reid's week-old son Gary died in 1975. Yet when she had his coffin exhumed from its burial plot last summer, the BBC revealed no human remains were found inside. Police Scotland have not been able to locate the body, but say new forensic analysis of the infant's clothing has found hair and surgical stitches. Jelly Joffrey has more.
It's a parent's worst nightmare. First to lose her baby son, then 42 years later to find no remains inside his coffin. Professor Sue Black conducted the exhumation. Her view then was unequivocal.
There were no human remains. There was no baby in the coffin.
Sue Black's report is quite a definite one.
6 months on, Lydia Reid and her solicitor are struggling to understand why the Crown now wants to compare a hair found in the clothing with tissue from Gary that was retained on surgical blocks and slides.
If I allow Police Scotland to have the blocks and slides, there's every chance that they may be destroyed. I want an independent company to do the testing. They will look after the blocks and slides carefully. They will ensure that at some point there is something left for me to bury.
The Crown are wanting to carry out destructive testing on blocks and slides, and I really can't see what evidential value the results of those tests, whatever they may be, can be to the Crown. It wouldn't provide any answers to where Gary's body is.
These are the skeletal remains of a baby, yet all that was found in Gary's coffin were neatly preserved clothes. Neither the Crown nor Police Scotland will discuss the evidence while the inquiry's ongoing, but Lydia Reid's anxious this latest development doesn't take away the little she has left of her baby boy.
That's why I waited 42 years to exhume my son, because he deserves a funeral. He's a little boy. He deserves some sort of funeral. He has a right to some sort of funeral.
Lydia Reid there, talking to Shelley Joffrey. The Royal Bank of Scotland is facing allegations that staff forged a great-grandmother's signature and signed her up for insurance she didn't want. Retired teacher Jean Mackay says she was stunned to find out she was being charged extra after applying for a credit card. Her stories emerged after former bank staff accused RBS of encouraging them to forge documents, something the bank denies. Here's our business correspondent David Henderson.
She only wanted a new credit card, but what she got was a 10-year battle with her bank. Retired teacher Jean Mackay found out RBS were overcharging her for something she'd never wanted, payment protection insurance.
So I went up to the bank and I pointed this out, and they said, "Oh, you must have signed the document to accept PPI." I said, "No, I didn't." But they insisted my signature was on it. I said, "Well, I want a copy of the document." And when I saw it, it was obvious that the signature accepting PPI was not my own, it was a forgery.
This is the form the bank gave her, and this, they claimed, was Mrs Mackay's signature. Close, but not the real thing. In a statement, RBS told us this complaint dates back 10 years and was thoroughly investigated by both the bank and the Financial Ombudsman, who did not rule in the customer's favour. As there was no means of establishing that the signature was Mrs Mackay's, the bank subsequently offered to make a payment as a gesture of goodwill. This is not the first time that RBS has been accused of forgery. 6 years ago, 2 insurance companies, then owned by RBS, were fined millions of pounds for forging customer complaint documents. And more recent claims have focused on whether RBS encouraged staff to forge signatures. Those allegations emerged in the last couple of weeks, former employees claiming it happened before RBS went bust a decade ago, when Fred Goodwin was in charge, and staff got bonus payments when they sold extra products to their customers.
I think a different system is absolutely needed. You know, we've had lots of instances in the past where the FCA haven't really looked properly, where the Ombudsman hasn't really done what one would have expected to do. It's why we're calling for the creation of a new independent financial regulator to be able to look at all of these allegations and look at them properly.
For Jean Mackay, it's taken 10 years to find out her claim may form part of a bigger picture. But RBS say no evidence was found to support these claims, and they deny falsifying records. David Henderson, reporting Scotland.
The Fire Brigades Union has passed a vote of no confidence in senior managers at the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. The union says it's concerned about the availability of fire appliances and the continuing reliance on overtime to maintain staffing levels. The Fire Service says it's perplexed by the FBU's decision. Katie Hunter reports.
Scotland's firefighters attend around 27,000 fires a year. Their union claims frontline workers are repeatedly raising concerns about staff shortages. Now the FBU's regional committee has passed a vote of no confidence in management.
Our members who are experiencing appliances being unavailable are experiencing coming in overtime to crew those appliances. They believe that the chief and the senior leadership team are not listening to their concerns. So therefore they had no other ultimate than to pass a vote of no confidence.
Since Scotland's regional fire services merged in 2013, fire deaths have increased from 31 annually to 44. Last month, it emerged firefighters could receive a pay rise of up to 20% if they take on new responsibilities, including counter-terrorism. But that deal could see the overall number of firefighters reduced by more than 200. The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service says it's perplexed by the FBU's no confidence vote. A statement said, the Fire Brigades Union is preventing 7,500 of Scotland's firefighters, many of whom are not FBU members, being given a real chance to do so much more for our communities and be paid 20% more to do so. The Scottish Government says talks are ongoing.
When there are tough discussions to be had about the future of the service, it's important that that happens in a collaborative and constructive way. And I would expect the management of the Fire and Rescue Service to fully involve the union as these discussions go forward.
Both sides say they're willing to talk, but so far, talks have failed. Katie Hunter, reporting Scotland.
Scotland's first clinic for victims of sexual violence is to open at the end of this week in Glasgow. Women who've been raped or suffered trauma will receive specialist care and support to help them attend future healthcare examinations. Our correspondent Lucy Adams reports.
Havan Amaro was raped as a teenager. It inspired her to set up a specialist clinic in London and now Scotland.
I don't want to make this about personal things at all, but you know, a lot of women experience sexual violence, and I suppose I was one of them. And I got amazing support from North London Rape Crisis and Rape Crisis Centres generally. But what I found was that the long-term support wasn't there, and especially when it came to healthcare. And I quite quickly picked up that I wasn't the only woman going through that, so that's why I set up the project, because I felt there needed to be something specialised for women.
This specially trained consultant is one of the doctors who'll be running the clinic.
There's a lot of women who are not able to get access to cervical smears, which is a test screening for precancerous changes in their cervix. It's a life-saving test. There are some women who find it difficult to make the step to go and book an appointment. There's a lot of reasons for that, but one of those is that survivors of sexual violence sometimes find it particularly difficult.
In the past year in Scotland, there were more than 1,700 rapes reported. The aim of this new project is to support women enough for them to come forward for medical assistance. Experts say some women who've been raped struggle to attend medical appointments.
Before the survivors even have the appointment, there will have been some work done around what do they need in order to even get through the front door. So it might be that volunteers are meeting them elsewhere so they can physically accompany them to the appointment. They'll be looking at how are they going to cope during the appointment. They'll also be doing some planning about what happens afterwards, because sometimes it can bring up some powerful feelings. So looking at their safety and their well-being sort of post-appointment as well.
The new clinic opens its doors this Saturday. Doctors say it will run for 3 years, but could then be rolled out to other locations. Lucy Adams, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
It's a big week at Holyrood. On Wednesday, MSPs are expected to endorse the Scottish Government's budget after prolonged negotiations and close scrutiny. But before that, tomorrow in fact, the topic is tax. It's believed MSPs are set to back the biggest change to Scottish income tax since the advent of devolution. I'm joined now by our political editor, Brian Taylor. Brian, to the budget first. There isn't any doubt, is there, that it's going to go through?
I think it'll go through. We had a deal at stage one between the SNP and the Greens. The Greens wanted a pay settlement, an improved pay settlement for those in the public sector. They wanted more money for local government and they wanted low carbon capital investment. They got each of these, particularly with regard to local government. I think the ministers would argue that the new settlement, the new deal, the revised budget allows a real terms increase for local council services. Now, there'll be some who will say, in terms of the practicalities and the day-to-day spending and the money particularly that'll have to be diverted to pay settlements, there may be questions over that. But in terms of the deal, ministers are adamant that it is a fair deal, it will tackle austerity, and I think it'll go through on Wednesday.
And let's move on to tomorrow then, and tax. Who are the winners and losers going to be?
This is huge. I mean, this is really a big deal. You know, complete power over Scottish income tax rates and bands, and big changes for the first time. Five bands ranging from 19% to 46%. If you earn up to £33,000, you're doing better. You're either standing still or your tax bill will decrease. Above that, it'll begin to increase and then increase quite sharply as you get to the higher earnings. Now, that's a debate, of course, about individual impacts, but there's also a big, almost philosophical, but certainly an economic, political debate going on in Scotland now. How do you grow? Scotland's economic growth is sluggish. How do you stimulate that? Do you do it, as the Tories say, by being competitive on taxation? They believe this will leave Scotland uncompetitive. Or, as the SNP argue, that this will be a productive boost to the public sector and thus to the economy more widely. That is a fundamental debate in Scottish politics.
Brian, we'll hear more from you tomorrow. Thanks very much for now. You're watching BBC Reporting Scotland. It's 7:15. A reminder of tonight's top story. After the jailing of football coach Barry Bonnell, the Hibs manager Neil Lennon speaks of his shock at finding his friends had been victims. And still to come, Elise Christie battles to be fit for her final event at the Winter Olympics. This year is the 75th anniversary of the Scottish War Blinded Centre at Linburn outside Edinburgh. It was created as a village in 1943 to help retrain and give a home to those blinded in action. Today, it supports anyone who's served in the military and has suffered loss of their sight in any circumstance. Our reporter Ian Hamilton met one serviceman who was injured in Iraq a decade ago.
Hands forward, raise both arms.
10 years ago, rifleman Ben Shaw was seriously injured in action. Ben, how did you lose your vision?
I was in Iraq in 2007 and I was on a routine patrol in Basra. Our patrol was contacted by an IED and I was hit by quite a lot of shrapnel, which resulted in me having both my eyes removed.
The Scottish War Blinded Centre here at Linburn has been helping veterans like Ben since 1943. And this year, they're celebrating their 75th anniversary.
On this 100-acre estate in the country, a complete village settlement has been built for the war-blinded, with a hostel for single men and houses for families.
Today, due to better protection, fewer military personnel are blinded in action. So the profile of the charity has changed.
Since 1943, we've been doing great work here with veterans. Initially, veterans who had lost their sight in service, but now we support veterans regardless of how they lost their sight. The connecting thread with that has always been thinking about the individual and thinking about what it is that people can do, not focusing on the disability.
So if you draw back, keep your elbow up. That's good. And come down a wee touch. That's good. And shoot.
You know, going from having total sight and being extremely independent to having a level of definite dependency and having to relearn life. You know, the war blinded have just been there whenever I've needed to develop the skills, that they're literally there straight away to help in any way, shape or form.
For the last 75 years, here at Linburn, the Scottish War Blinded has worked hard to help ex-service men and women to regain their independence by giving them the skills they need to live a full and active life. Ian Hamilton, Reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
It's still unclear whether the Livingston speed skater Elise Christie will be able to compete again in the Winter Olympics in South Korea. She crashed out of a race on Saturday night and ended up in hospital. She's due to race again tomorrow morning in her final event, but officials are staying tight-lipped about her fitness. From Pyeongchang, here's Alistair Lamont.
These Winter Olympics haven't really been any kinder to Elise Christie than the previous ones, so far at least. 4 years ago in Sochi, she was disqualified from each of her 3 events. Here, well, firstly, she crashed out in the final of the 500 metres, and then back here on Saturday in the Gangneung Ice Arena, she crashed once more. this time in the semi-final of the 1500 metres.
And it's between Zhu Yang and Christie now as they come round the final bend and they both crash. And Christie has crashed again now in the semi-final, right on the final bend.
And looked to have hurt herself pretty badly. So it's little surprise there's doubt over her participation in her final event, the 1000 metres. Those heats begin tomorrow at about 10 AM UK time. However, as her social media posts testify, she's doing everything she can to be fit in time to take part. Now, there was a GB short track training session planned for earlier today here, which we'd hoped to film, but unusually that was closed off to the media, adding just an extra layer of intrigue over Elise Christie's fitness. But Team GB did release a short statement. They said Elise has made good progress and was on the ice today. Team GB staff will continue to assess, support and monitor her overnight and tomorrow before a final decision is taken. So a level of positivity there. Elise Christie absolutely desperate to get one final opportunity to ensure Pyeongchang 2018 is memorable for the right reasons. Alistair Lamont reporting Scotland at the Winter Olympics in South Korea.
Rugby's Six Nations returns this weekend, and for Scotland it's the biggest match in the calendar. England come to Edinburgh. Scotland haven't had much success against them lately, but are hoping their strong recent home form means an upset could be on the cards at Murrayfield on Saturday. More from Andy Burke.
They say time is a great healer. For some Scotland fans, the memory of last season's 61-21 mauling at the hands of England will never fade. But what better way to lay the Twickenham ghost to rest than with a victory over their fiercest rivals at Murrayfield on Saturday?
From my point of view, in my time at Scotland, this is the most people have been ringing me up for tickets and asking me for tickets and things like that. So I think the crowd's going to be excellent. I think they'll be right behind us, and I think Murrayfield's been a very special place to play at for the players and everyone involved over the last couple of years.
Scotland at home and Scotland away have been very different animals in recent years, which is probably one reason why they can go into this week's game with a bit of confidence. They won 7 of the last 8 at Murrayfield. This England, the numbers are very impressive under Eddie Jones. To beat that side would be a huge achievement.
To help them pull off that huge achievement, the Scots may call on this man. After his first Test action in 20 months against France last time out, David Denton is ready for the challenge of taking down England.
We all know after watching them over the last 12 months they're a force to be reckoned with, and like I said, we're going to have to be at our best to do that. And look, we've got the players in the room, there's no doubt, but we've got to make sure we're there.
Scotland's recent record against England doesn't offer much hope for an upset. You have to go back 10 years to find the last Scottish Calcutta Cup victory, a 15-9 win here at Murrayfield. If Gregor Townsend's men are to derail the English juggernaut, it would certainly go down as one of the greatest wins in Scotland's history. Andy Burke, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
The last tenement in the Gorbals in Glasgow is being given a new lease of life. The listed building, which dates back to the 19th century, has been lying empty for more than 3 decades. Now, a number of organisations have formed a partnership to restore it. Our arts correspondent Pauline McLean reports.
It stood alone in this part of Glasgow for decades. But today, this Victorian survivor was the centre of attention as plans for its restoration were announced. It's the result of a partnership between a number of organisations determined to keep the last tenement alive.
Because a few people fought a manful fight against the bulldozer. Concrete monstrosities were the name of the game. And they've all been knocked down and they're doing new ones. This one stayed.
This area has seen many changes, the original tenements making way for tower blocks, which themselves have been replaced. Even the name has been changed, Lauriston, reflecting when this place was one of the most sought-after parts of the city.
And that's the kitchen.
For Anne McNeil, today's news is especially welcome. She lived here until she was 15.
It was a nice place to live, nice community, plenty of shops, plenty of pubs, and you had the pictures, the palace pictures, and down there was the public baths. And I never thought I'd see the day that would renovate it, which is really good. I think it's brilliant.
Work is already underway and is expected to be finished by the spring of next year. Like the original, a commercial space on the ground floor with 6 flats above, and a corner turret, part of the design a century ago, but never built till now. Pauline McLean reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Just time to get the latest on the weather forecast. Here's Judith.
Thank you very much, Sally, and a very good evening to you. Well, some rain in the forecast, but actually the week ahead looks largely dry and indeed very settled. And we did see some beautiful pictures today. This one sent from the Isle of Lewis, aquamarine blue seas there in the background. And we did see some striking colours too sent in from Steps. Now, as far as tonight's concerned, rain on the way, crossing the country. It's mild initially this evening, but that all clears away and it becomes dry with some clear spells and it turns colder. So here's that rain across the west, journeying across the country at quite a good pace actually. It does clear away fairly quickly, becoming confined to northern parts of Aberdeenshire and the Northern Isles. Behind it, drier and indeed clearer conditions following on, and after that mild start we're seeing at the moment, temperatures will fall away, probably settling at around 3 or 4 Celsius, but in parts of the Highlands close to freezing, a wee touch of frost, maybe even the risk of some icy patches as well. So tomorrow in the west it starts dry with good sunny spells. We get rid of that rain in the east fairly quickly, clears away from the Northern Isles as well during the morning. Then we're looking at a pretty good day. For Orkney and Shetland, dry, maybe the odd passing shower, you'd be very unlucky. Pretty good sunny spells as well. And generally that's the case across eastern Scotland. Temperatures that wee bit lower tomorrow. You'll notice that the air's slightly colder, but across the east, plenty of sunshine, really right from Aberdeenshire down to the borders, and across the southwest. The best the sunshine will be across western Scotland. That's where the high pressure is building in. We'll see highs of 10 Celsius in the south. The further north you are, the temperatures are that wee bit lower. Maybe the odd passing shower for the northwest, but again, you'll be very unlucky. Into the evening, well, it's dry, lengthy clear spells. We will see a frost forming and a possibility of some freezing fog patches. It's high pressure in charge right through the coming week, meaning a lot of dry weather in the forecast. Wednesday, another beautiful day. A cold start though. There will be a frost around too. Plenty of sunshine pretty much across the country, and temperatures starting to get that wee bit lower, so it's set to turn that bit colder. That's your forecast, Sally.
Thanks very much, Judith. Now a reminder of tonight's main news. The Hibs manager Neil Lennon has spoken of his time at Crewe Alexandra Football Club during Barry Bonnell's reign. The former football coach was sentenced this afternoon to over 30 years in jail for abusing young footballers. And that's all from Reporting Scotland for now. I'll be back with the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, from everyone on the team around the country, have a very good evening.